Welcome! Today we are going to learn about sexual harassment prevention in the workplace. The learning objectives in this training are as follows. To increase overall awareness of all employees about forms of harassment in the workplace. To define sexual harassment and discuss examples of this behavior. To review, revisit your organization's anti-harassment policy. To understand legal rights and appropriate procedures if harassed. To recognize common effects when harassed. To learn steps to conduct an effective investigation. To understand the prevalence, legal ramifications, and costs of workplace harassment. To foster a harassment-free, respectful workplace. In a recent study, what percentage of men reported being sexually harassed? Listed on the screen are the federal criteria for what is considered sexual harassment. Submission to the conduct is made either an explicit or implicit condition of employment. Submission to or rejection of the conduct is the basis for either continued employment or for decisions affecting pay, benefits, or advancement opportunities. The conduct has the purpose or effect of substantially interfering with an individual's work performance. The conduct creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, describes sexual harassment as a form of gender discrimination that is in violation of Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. In 1998, the U.S. Supreme Court made employers more liable for sexual harassment of their employees. Moreover, the Society for Human Resource Management has reported that 62% of companies now offer sexual harassment prevention training programs, and 97% have a written sexual harassment policy. In a recent study of women who were harassed, what percentage reported it was a supervisor? Unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature constitute sexual harassment when the conduct explicitly or implicitly affects an individual's work performance or creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. Sexual harassment has specific criteria. For instance, when the employee did not solicit or incite it, and the employee regards the conduct as undesirable or offensive. It's important to note that there are many behaviors that are not defined as sexual harassment. Here are some forms of harassment. Verbal, off-color jokes, profanity, sexual comments, threats, noises such as barking, whistling, etc., requests for sexual favors. Nonverbal, displaying obscene material, notes, cartoons, or photos, leering, blowing kisses, licking lips, winking, provocatively posing or adjusting clothing in the presence of others. Physical, stroking, patting, hugging, pinching, grabbing, cornering, blocking passage, kissing, unsolicited back rubs or neck rubs, rubbing against someone's body. Written, letters, notes, or emails containing inappropriate material delivered to either an individual or a group. We are seeing more harassment via email, instant messaging, and text messages as the world has become electronic. Be aware that your company does have a policy about sexual harassment in the workplace. If you have not read this, you need to do so. You can contact your human resources, HR department for this information. Workplace sexual harassment can occur at any place where the business of the employer is conducted. It is not limited to the actual office. It can occur in the parking lot, at any work function, at client meetings, or at vendor visits, anywhere that you are doing business or that you are in a setting where you are with your coworkers. Employers can be legally responsible for sexual harassment against their employees and liable to them for damages. However, liability depends on the type of harassment and who committed it. Harassment by a supervisor. If the harassment results in an employment action against the victim, such as firing, demotion, or unfavorable changes in work assignments, the employer is liable. The employer can also be liable if the harassment creates a hostile work environment. However, the employer has a possible defense if it can be shown that reasonable steps were taken to prevent and promptly correct the problem, and the employee unreasonably failed to take advantage of the company's preventative or corrective measures. Harassment by a coworker. The employer is liable if he or she knew or should have known about the harassment. However, the employer is not liable if immediate and appropriate corrective actions were taken to remedy the problem. Everyone pays a price. There can be financial losses to the organization. Just to legally defend an allegation is costly. Plaintiff settlements and verdicts can significantly impact the bottom line and even bankrupt a company. There can also be costs to an individual's reputation, and those may be irreversible, impacting the individual at work, in the community, and at home. Damage to the reputation of the organization is a cost as well. This may severely affect the future profits and success of the company. Prevention is the best tool to eliminate sexual harassment in the workplace. Employers are encouraged to take the steps necessary to prevent sexual harassment from occurring. They should clearly communicate to employees that sexual harassment will not be tolerated. They can do so by establishing an effective complaint or grievance process and taking immediate and appropriate action when an employee complains. If you believe you are being subjected to inappropriate comments or conduct, be direct. Speak firmly with no apologizing or smiling, making clear the behavior is unacceptable and that it must stop immediately. Keep a diary or journal with accurate notes of what is said or done, including dates, times, places, and quotes. State your objection in a letter or email to your supervisor and HR. Keep a copy for your file. Follow all reporting procedures. Speak up honestly if you feel offended or uncomfortable. Remaining silent doesn't help anyone. Silence can be perceived as acceptance. Confronting the offensive action the first time it happens is preferable to waiting until it is a repeated behavior. Many people think that if they ignore the behavior, it will not happen again. This is far from the truth. The offender needs to know that the behavior is unacceptable. Many times, harassers do not understand that their behavior is unwelcome. They need to be told clearly, "I am offended by your behavior. Do not do that again." In this way, you are communicating clearly to the other person that the conduct or comments are unwelcome. An individual who is being harassed may demonstrate it by any of the following behaviors: increase in absenteeism, lateness, or leaving early, a change in attitude, avoidance of overtime or travel, lowered creativity or efficiency in work performance, poor concentration, inability to meet deadlines, lack of confidence, avoidance of meetings and communication with others, inability to perform to job standards. The sexual harassment reporting procedure is as follows. First, report the situation to your supervisor. If your supervisor is unavailable or you just do not feel comfortable with your supervisor, report it to Human Resources or any other member of management. There will not be punishment for reporting harassment. An investigation will be completed upon reporting. Know that any form of retaliation is against company policy and strictly prohibited. Under no circumstances should an employee report harassment to a supervisor who is the harasser. When the intervention of a third party is necessary, you need to report the inappropriate behavior to your immediate supervisor. If your supervisor is the harasser, report to his or her supervisor. Next, we will discuss the process for lodging a formal complaint. In order to lodge a formal complaint, the following information will need to be included: nature of the offensive comments or conduct, the date and time of each occurrence, names of any witnesses, and the context in which incidents occurred. Also include any feelings of distress felt or experienced because of the comments. It is important to remember that complainants should be aware that information provided may have to be passed on to the accused individual. The accused is entitled to know about each allegation and is entitled to respond. Also, it is important for the complainant and the accused that confidentiality be maintained by all involved in the investigation. It's important to know that some people within the company may need to know when this occurs. In order to avoid harassing actions, each employee must strive to act with fairness, respect, and integrity at all times when dealing with employees of your organization, as well as any and all clients, contractors, vendors, and suppliers. Ask yourself the following questions. Could this behavior or action be offensive to anyone? Is the conduct suggestive or blatantly sexual? Is the conduct unwelcome by any person subjected to it? Does the conduct create a hostile or offensive work environment? Have I requested, suggested, or demanded sexual favors, especially as a condition of employment or career and job success? Would I feel uncomfortable if I were on the receiving end of the same action? If you answered yes to any of these questions, it is harassment. It's best to err on the side of caution. When you are talking or behaving in a way that could be interpreted as sexual or suggestive, watch the facial changes and body language of people around you. Do they look embarrassed, turn and walk away, or remain serious as you are telling jokes? Oftentimes, by just paying more attention to those around us, we can determine if we are acting in an offensive manner. Respect others' values. What you think is funny or just kidding around may be very offensive to someone else. If it is offensive to another person, it may be a case of sexual harassment. Remember, there are no easy answers in most cases. In a multicultural society, cultural differences can arise. Workplace harassment may be straightforward, insulting, demeaning behavior toward another, or more indirect actions. Also, remember, under no circumstances should an employee report harassment to a supervisor who is the harasser. Some behavior that is appropriate for a social setting may not be appropriate in the workplace. The key: sometimes the actual action is not as important as how it is perceived. If behavior or elements of the work environment are unwelcome, uncomfortable, or hostile to even one person, it can be considered harassment.